my first husband had leukemia, which in those years, I never heard of it.
Two of my partners have died of AIDS.
I had some experiences like in my neighborhood of kids that I was really close with, where all of a sudden like people would kind of start turning on me.
Well, thanks for doing this interview. As you know, I'm doing this new video book project looking at hardship and adversity and trauma in particular, and how we come back from that.
But fatness is still a very socially acceptable thing to make fun of. Like, it's a common trope culture. I mean, you really cannot escape it. And like, I was absolutely tormented as a kid around that. Like,
I can remember being at 3 and being in 2nd grade and being almost like stalked by a kid who was 4 years older, you know, like basically twice your size. It wasn't, but like, I remember once just biking, and he, as I biked by him, he grabbed me and threw me into a tree, and it ripped my fingernail off.
I am a victim of like sexual abuse when I was about fairly young. I want to say anywhere from like 4 to 6 years old. I was molested twice by 2 different people.
So you know illness.
Oh yes, I know illness.
You know.
I know illness. Yeah, I know illness. Illness beyond, beyond correction.
Ooh, definition of trauma. Someone or something causes an individual significant harm. And I believe it has harm that it impacts you of how you think and how you feel, and that it is significant enough that it impacts you not just in that moment, but it carries over.
The way that I typically think about trauma is any experiences, or sometimes sort of repeated experiences, that overwhelm a person's capacity to cope.
That you are thinking about it and have feelings about it that do not go away.
So it sort of surpasses the resources that they have to make sense of, to integrate, and to react to in a way that actually helps them establish a sort of a felt sense of safety again.
That the injury, mostly I would think is a mental injury, does not go away, that it lasts.
It's oftentimes that they're hurt by somebody and then they didn't feel like it was either possible to tell somebody, or they told somebody and they were disregarded or dismissed. And that sort of deepens the wound around trauma and actually sort of creates a lot of what we then think of as sort of the symptoms of trauma, because there's this absence of being met that helps them to make sense of, integrate, and sort of effectively respond to.
Because I remember being at a point where I just wanted to give up, and I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know I had a choice. I didn't know that I could just stop and breathe or take a walk in nature, or what's mindful meditation.
That there's a solid base of research at this point that looks at especially repeated early childhood trauma experiences as having a much more profound and pervasive effect on individuals than sort of standalone single incident traumas.
right. Well, and those fears of the trauma that I experienced before that, like those voices still ring in my head today, right now. Like, there are voices from then when I am walking down the street or doing something that I'm like, that fear is there. Like, they're going to say this thing or they're going to say that thing. Like, that's going to come out.
And as a survivor of traumatic events,
Yes.
we can learn to turn our pain into our power, to use it as medicine.
You know, really, when things happen, you can't change them, but you can learn to cope with them.
As I learned early on that when I did share, when I did take the risk to be vulnerable and share about something, especially something that was different or not the norm experience, people would just light up and say, me too. And it was this like radical connection.
You really can't feel sorry for yourself. It's your baby. That's the gist of it, really.
What does that mean to you? It's your baby.
It's your problem. It's not your problem or or my mother's problem.
Yeah.
It's my problem.
It's my baby. It's mine.
Right. It's my problem, and I have. You're the one that has to cope with it.
You have to be self-nurturing. You really do have to learn to take care of yourself. And there's this very strong mind-body connection. And I realized that from, having to deal with AIDS, HIV, loss of friends, loss of family, loss of animals. So you have to allow yourself time to grieve.
Well, how do you cope? Number one, you can't feel sorry. The first thing I think is you can't feel sorry for yourself.
Yeah.
And the second thing, you gotta pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and keep moving.
Processing the trauma to me means going to the child or the 18-year-old self, 17-year-old self, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and actually being a witness for the trauma and the grief and allowing that to come forth.
You need to keep going for yourself and for your children.
You can't fall apart because they need you.
Hey, this is what this other person has done, and it's not about me.
Right.
But ultimately, the only person who's going to set us free is ourselves. We can go and see a million healers, and believe me, healers are important.
Yeah.
You're a healer, I'm a healer. We all serve. Yet at the end of the day, we are really just holding space for someone to hear themselves, see themselves, and in their own time and space, make their own choices to facilitate their own healing.
Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah.
Focused. I was focused. You had to go to work. Life had to go on.
When my husband passed away, and the kids we sent for my daughter who was in grammar school, and my son was home. He was at Northwestern. He was my mother, my very smart, fabulous mother, who'd seen a lot and she sat on the bed in Herbie's room, and the kids said, what are we gonna do? And my mother looked them in the eye and she said, we'll handle it. I can remember that like yesterday. So that's my inheritance.
How do I bounce back from trauma? Well, we've talked about this a couple of times, but I think like forgiveness is like my best weapon for that. Because forgiving people is empowering. Not only is it like important for you, but it also makes you have more power when you can forgive someone that's done an incredible wrong to you.
And eventually the sun comes out.
Yes.
So, number one, you have to educate yourself, because I think that dispelled a lot of the fear.
It takes great courage to face our demons, shall we say? I don't even know if I love that term. But to face our grief.
Definitely.
For instance. Or trauma.
Yeah, I think
great courage.
Absolutely. And I think that the courage only comes from being in tune with yourself and taking the necessary steps and learning that when you do step out of your comfort zone into a new way of living and looking at things, a new life unfolds and opens up, a new world unfolds.
I was thinking, and I'm like, I need an answer. And then I just felt like eventually I was like, no, you don't need an answer. At the end of the day, you don't know what that person was thinking.
These parents basically just kind of took me underneath their wing and guided my emotional and spiritual health through a really difficult year.
And yes, like there are horrible things happening all over the world, but in order for us as a collective of humanity to heal, I think every person has to be able to own their story, and every person has to be able to feel the feelings that go along with, you know, their own grief and their own process.
And that's very and that's very much easier said than done. And I'm validating that right now. It's easier said than done, but it is possible to be done. You're not a victim of your circumstances. That's just, if anything, your circumstances are like a piece to becoming a conqueror of the circumstance.